Welcome to Secrets from the Scene, a show for local musicians who want to improve their music, grow their audience, and learn about Minnesota's music scene. If you're interested in talking about all things music related and meeting interesting people from our local community, you're in the right place. Welcome to Secrets from the Scene. My name is Stephen Helvig, and I'm your host. Thanks for joining us. Today's guest is Thomas Sticha. I'm super excited to meet him. This is our first time meeting, but he's been a recommended guest from the past. He has a background that is, I think, particularly helpful for today's music business. But first, a little bit about Thomas. He's a country folk artist from St. Paul, great songwriter, great musician. He's got an awesome show coming up that we're going to talk about, and he's particularly good, I think, with social media. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit today, something we've talked about plenty on the podcast, but this angle is going to be, how do you win the cold audience? And if you're thinking, I don't know what a cold audience is, this episode is going to be good for you because you need to know what that means and what the difference is between a warm audience and a cold audience, and ultimately what that means for you as the content maker, as the storyteller, for not only with the content you make, but your brand, your messaging, everything. Thomas understands these things. He's good at them. I can't wait to talk and learn from him. Please welcome Thomas Sticha.
And I can't wait to get to Bozeman if I ever make it there, to feel the river running through in that foggy mountain air.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Did I get your last name right?
It is. It's Sticha, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like normally it goes through about 3 or 4 guesses before it gets to the correct one. So Sticha is, yeah.
It was easy for me to remember once you had said it once because over the summer, my wife and I took a trip to Greece and Croatia. And
There you
there's
go.
a local drink in Croatia called Sticha. Or in Greece, actually. It was in Greece.
Oh, wow.
And Sticha.
Okay.
And it's made
That's
from
my
like
mom, man.
the resin. And
That's my
it
wife,
was-
Miss Sticha. Yeah. Anyway, all right.
Yeah. We loved it. We brought a
Sweet.
bottle back. So thanks for being here, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here.
Give the listeners a quick background on your music.
Yeah. I describe it as kind of, at this point, vibey country folk. So it's taking some of the bite out of like traditional classic country gold and adding some more folk elements to it. I recently started playing more keys in our set too, so I think it adds an element of a little bit different than your classic country artist, which I think is a growing category within country.
Yep.
There's obviously like the renaissance of true classic 90s country happening right now, and I think we're a little bit less of that as time goes on, always trying to make artistic choices, usually instead of how do we get people hammered and dancing and everything. So I think we can swing both ways within that category, but as time goes on, my interest level in the more artistic approach is becoming more of a priority for us. So yeah.
Sure.
Yep. But-
And you have a background as a keyboardist primarily.
I do, yeah.
That was your first instrument?
Yeah, that was, I took lessons from kindergarten to, 16 years old and thought it was really dumb. And then
Way to
later,
stick in there.
I
though.
know, later in life, high school, college, picked it back up again and started touring in my early 20s with a different artist. And I got hired to tour manage, play keys, and then he was an independent artist, so sort of a day-to-day road manager and just kind of general manager of this guy.
Wow. Who was the artist?
His name was Andrew Ripp. He's a Christian, kind of rootsy Christian music artist.
Okay.
And we attached ourselves to these couple tours that were honestly just really big and exciting. So we got to play anywhere from maybe 5 to like 15,000 a night, which
Wow.
was very different from my bar experience when I lived in Michigan. And as someone in your early 20s, you're like, oh my gosh, this is I've kind of made whatever my dream was. And then at some point it wasn't, those like mountaintops weren't worth the everything in between. And I was getting engaged, getting married at the time, and it just felt right to be done with that. A lot of travel and different things, and I think I was one of the only folks not based in Nashville on those tours, so there was always an added element of travel and logistics. That those mountaintops were great, but if you're not like a better person after those mountaintops because of all the other stuff in your life, it was kind of time to be done with that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
During those tours, were you based here? Or were you based in Michigan?
I was based here.
Okay.
Sort of a funny juxtaposition, but was doing these tours, and then while I was engaged for part of those touring years, I lived with my parents actually for the first time in like a really long time. So I will never forget this. We got to play the Target Center when it came through, and as a Minnesota sports fan and growing up here, it's like, I can't believe this, you know. And then my parents drove me home, and I slept in my bed at my parents' house. So it was a pretty wild, just a lot of ups and downs. And then I got married a few years ago and wanted to be home more, which makes sense as life carries on, and was doing some more writing at the time. And that's how I got into kind of doing my own process with that. So yeah.
Yeah. Get off the stage, play for 15,000 people, sleep in your parents' basement.
Yeah. Living the dream, man. And then, and with my own songwriting, then once you kind of start from scratch on your own, it's a lot of the gigs that aren't super gratifying, or at the time they're not, you know,
It's a grind.
You're playing to a few people in a bar who are half asleep. And so I think I learned a lot from that, and I was probably spoiled by that a little bit in my early 20s, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you learned a lot.
Yeah.
Seeing how that operates at that level, and what makes for a good performance at that level, and that sort of thing. Yeah, it sets the bar high.
Yeah.
But that's good.
Yeah.
And how fortunate, you know?
Yeah.
So how long has it been since you made that transition? How long have you been sort of solo Thomas Sticha artist?
That was probably like 2022, so maybe that was probably about 3 years ago.
Yep.
Is when I started more intentionally writing songs for this country folk kind of era of my life. So yeah.
Outside of the, you know, the personal fulfillment of like, hey, this is what I want to do as a person, what have you found to be the benefits and the hardships of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of the benefits are mostly true autonomy, where every decision you make is one that you get to make and that you get to be excited to make, about musical choices, about band personnel, and what shows are good for our system and what shows are not good for our system. I think that whenever we're playing shows, there's always a moment of like, I wrote this literally on my bed, and for some reason it's like worthy enough to be in front of people. And I will never take that for granted, because it's, I think, you know, Billie Eilish recording music in her bedroom, it's like those translate to these like massive stages, and that's like truly an honor. So I think another benefit is you get to take it as far as you want to. And I might rephrase that, but one of the benefits is that you get to take it sort of as far as you can, or as far as you want to, and you never have to do anything that you don't truly want to do if it doesn't make sense for your business or your brand. And then some of the downfalls may be one and the same, where you can push yourself really hard. A lot of times it feels like you're spinning your tires, and I don't know if that'll ever go away, but there's a little bit of pressure to go, it's all on me to make the system work. And I think initially you have to care about it the most of anybody before you have listeners or other band members who are buying into your whole system, but you have to be the one that's pushing the whole thing. So
yeah, absolutely. Autonomy is so attractive to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But there's a downside to it.
Yeah.
You're in charge, which means you're also at fault for everything that doesn't work.
And there's been many a times. Yeah.
Well, I think that's awesome. And, you know, it sounds like you're in touch with sort of what you need out of the process anyways. I think there's a lot of people that would have stayed as the side person. And there's nothing wrong with that if it works for you. But if you know that, hey, this isn't fulfilling in the same way it needs to be for future, then just checking in with yourself and going, it's a hard thing to do in the music business, because there's so much pressure. And I think people hold really, really tightly, myself included. I can definitely talk from experience here, where you can hold tightly to an idea of what you want this thing to be. but you have to be willing to let it change over time. And that's a tough thing to do. And so props to you for kind of seeing that early on and saying, oh, there's another way to do this. But let's start talking a little bit about, okay, you made this pivot. Let's talk about how you started to set up your brand and start thinking about your socials, because it's something I followed you, I think, since maybe I had Clayton Ryan on, and he referred you, and he had nothing but good things to say about what you were doing with marketing. And I agree. I think it's very personable. It connects with people, and you're growing, right? You're getting those numbers up. There's results. Give people a little bit of the background of where these skills came from.
Yeah, I would say the technical side of it. I mean, my degree was in marketing, but that feels like it's almost halfway irrelevant. But I think it's been so long since that era of my life that I don't think that's a qualification anymore. But I think the reason why I've been borderline obsessive about making those things work is from those shows early on when you're like, there's no one here. How do you get people to come back if they enjoyed the show? How do you get people that are new, that have never experienced your show? And are there ways to make it really easy for the consumer to understand everything that you're about before they even come to your show?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was primarily just me going, I want this system to grow, and I'm seeing cold audiences as the way to bring in a lot of new people quickly. We drive by this restaurant in St. Paul. It's a Korean restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I drive by there, I wonder, what are they doing to reach cold audiences to come into this restaurant?
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a clear-cut answer, or if they do or if they don't. And I think there's something to be said about local community and warm audience and people who live nearby that will always come to that restaurant. But when you see place close, that was your favorite coffee shop or your favorite restaurant, you go, I wonder how they were reaching new people. And I don't know if there's always an answer to that question. So, anyway.
All right. So
side tangent.
This is what I mean. No, it is. It's there. We're going to have plenty of side tangents when it comes to this, but I want to take it back one step, which is for people that are just I don't know anything about this.
Sure.
Warm audience, cold audience. All right. So I think that's the first thing we have to talk about. And feel free to jump in on anything, because I am not an expert either. But I have let's say a basic understanding.
Sure.
Warm audience is somebody who's had some sort of touch point with you previously. They are familiar with you. Maybe they know you because they're connected through friends on social media. Maybe they've seen your name on a bill over and over again, but they don't know your music yet. That could all be warm audience. Cold audience, they don't know you. They don't know you. They're not connected to you. They don't have a reason to care yet. Does that pretty much sum it up?
I think I would say there's obviously sliding scales between your warmest audience. So you're initially, as a musician, your friends, your family, people who would love to support you. You could be a comedian or an author and they would still support you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's the next phase of that is, people who have experienced your show. They've maybe listened to your music or have been in touch with you on an email list. And then I think there's this gray area where I'm always surprised at how many people they seem like they're cold, but they've actually been paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I would almost say that's close to warm as well, which you kind of alluded to, where they might not have interacted or listened to your music, but they know vaguely what you're about.
I would say that would be me.
Yeah, sure.
For you.
Sure.
I vaguely know it about, but I'm not, I don't know enough, right? I haven't gone to a show. I haven't actively followed or paid attention to an event or something like that until now, of course, but I kind of know what you're about.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
That's that area. I would say not completely cold.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen your name a couple times.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people in that area that you don't realize are there.
Yeah.
And then cold, they just don't know. They don't know anything.
Yeah, where I think cold audience doesn't mean necessarily that they're not interested or couldn't be interested in what you're doing. But I think, the definition of that would be they just haven't had the chance to find out what you're about.
Yeah, they're just unaware.
Opinion. Yeah.
It hasn't crossed their feed yet. It hasn't come to their attention in any sort of way. Or if it did, they didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I say quite often is people don't choose what they don't know are options yet. So if people don't know that you're an option, they will never choose to come to your show or never choose to listen to your music. And I think they cross that threshold of cold to warm when they know that you're an option. As a consumer, when you're trying to pick out a box of cereal, you have your options in front of you. And if you don't know that a certain cereal exists, you'll never choose that cereal, you know?
Yep.
So I think that's people crossing into warm from cold. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so I think that, especially on the local scene level, right? The majority of the time, people just constantly are creating things for their warm audience. They are, people that kind of know them already, and they just stay in those small waters. They're missing out on that huge amount of people that are closer to cold than warm, right? That's always going to be bigger than your warm audience.
Yeah.
Always, unless you're Taylor Swift or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. Yes.
your cold audience is there's way more fish in that sea. And so, but it's also harder to know how to get their attention or what to make, or like talk people through your process of getting attention from a cold audience.
In terms of, let's say your goal is getting people to a show, which means you want to get your messaging out to this cold audience in large numbers and hope that a few of them bite and end up attending, or at least know that it's an option. I would say people underestimate the ability to think empathetically about their cold audience because they're wondering this whole time, what's in it for me as the consumer? And if it's, as an artist, you're thinking, well, I just want them to fall in love with me, you're wrong. All they want is a date night or a fun thing to do after work. And if they end up coming because of those reasons, or coming up to your show, or at least knowing you're an option, they might fall in love with you still, but that's not why they're going. So I think thinking about what's in it for your consumer, it's not that they need to think your music is the greatest thing in the world. It might be because they need a release from their stress of their normal 9-to-5 job. And I think approaching a cold audience in that way is really helpful to at least make an introduction, because you have their attention once they've been heard and seen by you, to go, I just want a night out. I want to learn about a venue that I've never been to, because that's just as much of the experience as coming to see us at a show. So I think there's ways you think about it. Donald Miller, the story brand concept is the consumer's the hero. As the artist, you're not the hero of the story. And I think thinking empathetically about what does this consumer want from you is a great way to kind of interact with the cold audience. So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I love, you pointing out that you need to think from your, potential fan or your consumer, whatever you want to say, client. You have to think from their perspective. What's in it for them?
Sure.
And why are they here looking for this in the first place? Is it because they need an escape from work? Are they looking for a date night? Are they looking for new friends? Looking for their scene, so to speak, of these are the type of people I want to hang out with and know. And that's not necessarily you on stage. It's the other people going to your shows, right? What's that community like? And are those people I want to hang out with? You pointing out, are they going to fall? The artist is making content of I just want you to love this song.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. But it's a little bit if you think about it like dating or marriage is falling in love is like marriage, right? You're committed now. That's your super fans. They're showing up thick and thin. They're standing in the front, and those are your super fans. You don't just propose to people right away, though. You got to work up to it.
Good point.
And so if you're putting out stuff like, will you marry me?
Sure.
Will you marry me?
Sure.
Please love my stuff. It's desperate. You need to start a little bit lighter than that and give people something that's a little less committal, right?
For sure.
And obviously this is just an analogy of ways to think about your content, but when you make stuff for cold audiences, it does help when it's a little less, here's everything about me that you need to know. It can be a little bit more introductory, is my point. Sometimes Some people will just see you performing your song and fall in love with it. That does happen.
Sure.
That can happen.
Sure.
Absolutely. And you can mix that in. But some people aren't ready for that right away. They need to get to know something maybe more tangential to what you're doing that might be interesting to them. And then they'll slowly get around
Sure.
to falling in love with your music and falling in love with you as a brand, as a person. But it doesn't necessarily just start there. And I think that's a really common misconception for people, that they miss out on so many other types of things they could be doing and saying and connecting with an audience with besides just, here's my song.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The dating metaphor is not something I've thought about, but even in terms of like, it's hard to date these days, I think. I got married a few years ago and don't know what the dating scene is like, but I've heard that it's harder to meet people where you don't know people are options. And I think, yeah, you wouldn't go up to someone you just found out as an option and go, I'm going to give my whole life to you. There is sort of a process to warm up. And I think the people that are in that super warm audience now for me are people who have been to, 10 or 15 shows. And you're like, I can see the commitment there, but I wouldn't expect that unless you're just like uber talented and charismatic and different things, which
Yes.
I don't think I'm there. But yeah, there's sort of a process to court them into your warm
I would
pool.
say
Yeah.
that. And I think part of the confusion here of why people go, well, I see so-and-so, they just post this and it works. Okay. There are a few pillars of things that work because we're human. Okay. If you are really one of the most talented people doing this thing and you just sing your songs, yeah, that does work.
Sure.
But you better be one of the best, and that'll work. If you are extremely attractive, that will always work. It's just the truth because we're human. And that is something that is always socially and physically embedded into our minds. We are interested.
Yeah.
If you are very attractive,
Sure.
that works. If you are hilarious and entertaining just naturally, that works, right? That's the third pillar. And then I would say if you're educating, if you are offering something of value right away and you're learning something from this. Now, that's not so much from artists, but it can be from a lot of other industries. There's leaders and influencers that, because they're just providing information that's helpful to your everyday, right? Thought leaders of some sort. I would say those four things, they always work, but they're not the only four things. And you have to be very, very good in those areas to stand out from the people that are leading in those areas, right? So there's a million other little nooks and crannies
Sure.
that you can occupy
Sure.
that are unique to you. And that's the hard thing to figure out. Easier said than done, but that's where it lands. And you can have all the gray area of like, I'm kind of doing this and kind of doing a little, 1 foot in this little area of content and 1 foot in this area of content. So yes, when you see really, really successful musicians or creators of any sort doing one of those things and you're just trying to emulate that, I get it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but try to be more creative at times. Like, you don't have to just do that thing. I think there's I've had conversations where people, I can clearly see they're like, that person is just really hot and they're showing their whatever and they get frustrated because
Sure.
they're not going to do that, or they don't have that, or they
Sure.
feel like they don't have that.
Sure.
But that's just one thing.
Yeah,
Okay. It's just one thing. It is not the only thing.
for sure. I think finding that thing of yours, like, is what's so initially challenging for an artist to find out, or even a studio or a producer
Anybody.
or
Yep.
anything.
How is your brand of cereal better than the
Yeah.
next brand of cereal?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I think once you, like, in the last 3 years for me, I haven't always known what my brand is. Like, it's not like I've been working towards this specific thing and now I've like made it, it's like a slow evolution. But only once you find that out for yourself, I think, can you go, now here's my packaging, my vibe on stage, my music, my branding, my colors, my website, my social aesthetic. Only once you're secure in what you are as an artist or a creative or a business or a restaurant can you then go, here's my offering to the world, take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to reach as many people as I can and hope that a few people stick around, And I've talked to so many artists who are still trying to figure that out. And then, how many people do we all know that have had artistic changes in their life and they're like, I'm not doing this style of music anymore. And then they're like restarting where they have warm audience from just them as a person and as a brand.
Yeah.
But if they're transitioning into a different genre or a different industry or something, going into realty after a lifelong career in music, how do you carry those things over and then reestablish what you are in a different frame of mind?
Yeah.
So it's kind of always an ever-changing thing, but it's only once you figure that thing out can you communicate that clearly, in my opinion. So
Yeah, and to add to that, I think the thing is that you have those things whether you've thought about them or put any time into them at all.
So true.
It's still there.
So true.
Your brand is what people are going to talk about when you're not there. Okay, what they think. And so in some cases it might be very little because they just don't know.
Sure.
Your brand might be average, regular musician playing at venue because they don't know anything else about it. That's a bad brand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That is bad. But there's so much opportunity to improve on that. Okay? And so when you start being consistent and making choices about these things, then you're starting to craft your brand. You're starting to put intention into it. And it comes down to like what kind of messaging you have online and that vibe, what the graphics are looking like, and of course, what the music sounds like, right? For artists. There's more that goes into it, but those are some of the big pillars. You've gone through these. If you had to describe your brand, how would you do that?
Well, yeah, I actually haven't gone through this myself, but there's actually like sort of archetypes that you can follow. And I forget the name of there's like a number of different archetypes where it's like the Joker, the Sage, all these different personalities of your brand. And I think that my personal brand, if there's some element of like mystique to it, where people know pretty quickly whether you're on my website, whether you're on my socials, that there's an element of like sleight of hand almost, where I know the bigger picture more than the consumer does, which is like in comedy, you always have the release of the joke, and there's a moment where the audience realizes, okay, you knew more than me. Now I'm like figuring that out in real time, where I think there's an element for me of, is he like serious? Is he not serious? I have a song I just wrote about my insurance agent sending me a birthday card. And it's like a 2-minute payoff, 2-minute timeline from start, super sad song about, having a lonely birthday, getting a card in the mail, and you're like, oh my gosh, someone cares. And the song is called Pete, based after my insurance agent. And the payoff of the song is, it's from your insurance agent, this birthday card. And so there's an element of like, you don't really know ever what's really going on. And I think that's a fun journey for me to take people on, because we have songs that are really traditionally country. We have songs that are just like goofy as hell, like Pete, and a couple other ones that we're known to play. And so I think that my brand, it is a little bit mystique country, I would say. And yeah, I can't remember what we were.
Yeah, I was asking you to kind of explain
Yeah.
your brand. And that's also kind of tied into storytelling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you've got to set up stuff.
Sure.
And there's got to be a start, a finish, and an end to that thing. And that makes for good content.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's circle back to the cold audience thing.
Sure.
The importance of that first second. When you're making social media, when you're making clips and stuff, how do you think about your first 1 to 3 seconds?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think even that question frames it well. You literally have such little time to make an impression. And for me, it's, let's say it's on digital media, so TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, yada, yada. There's visual aesthetic, there's text, there's music, there's audio quality, and those things have to be in the perfect format for the consumer to not be distracted by one of them for that first 1 or 2 seconds to matter. If the audio is too loud, if the text is too small, if there's not enough contrast between the foreground text and the background, those aren't maybe things that people can go, I know what that is and I don't like it, but they feel it and they will scroll away so fast. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I try to do in everything, almost everything that I do, is around Minnesota. I play almost all local shows here in Minnesota. We're kind of growing a little bit outside of that, but if there's an attachment to location in the first 1 or 2 seconds, people are in. And so I think there's like 10 things that the consumer has to be aware of in the first 10 seconds. And if any of those things are off or they're not interested in, they will scroll away so fast. And we all do it. I'm guilty of that as well. Mm-hmm. If I see a guy with a guitar on my screen, I'm usually like, goodbye, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I love the honesty there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one thing a slight side tangent.
Yeah.
I, with clients that come in and do song packages here at Helvig Productions, and we're doing social media and stuff, one of the things you have to talk about is like, well, what do you want your brand to be like?
Yeah.
And we have a branding guide that is on our website, and I'll link it in the show notes if you're interested. And it's basically just a series of questions for people to start thinking about, because as you alluded to earlier, you don't just know it. You figure it out over time, and it will likely evolve over time. Where you start isn't probably where it's going to end. And so you just have to kind of keep going through this like once a year. Maybe the first time you do it, you can't answer half the questions. You just don't know yet, but you got to start. As you keep working through the guide, you just get closer and closer to this thing, and you can start to find little things that you might, outside of your music, that you might be able to do. In your case, okay, your cold audience you need to reach, they're all in Minnesota. It's an easy touch point of like, think about the things that your fans outside of liking your music might also be interested in. And a lot of people have local pride, right? They buy, their sports team paraphernalia, their local town, their coffee shop, their brewery hat, and whatever. They like that stuff. And so by providing more of that information, it's an easy tangential connection point that they're like, hey, I like that you gave me something entertaining today about something I care about. And then they found your music because it's playing in the background, or you talked about a show or whatever. And that's just one of those, again, many, many, many different things that you can touch on that don't have to be about your music. It doesn't have to be about, this is everything, that serious, like everything about the song and the meaning of it. Those are great for the fans that are already bought in. They love that content. So there is a place for it. But again, cold audience doesn't really care. They're just going to skip by. I remember the point I was trying to get at here, which is you had said, if a guy with a guitar is just on screen, boom, gone. One of the things in the branding guide that I'll ask, one of those questions is like, who do you follow that's local and why? And the amount of people that'll be like, kind of no one. It's like, okay, well, that's the reality. That's the reality.
Sure.
If you're not going to do it, why do you expect other people to do it?
I feel like, not that I'm backtracking, because I have scrolled by so many guitar guys or guitar folks. I think if I've never heard of them, it has to be a really quick and great sell in the first 1 to 2 seconds for me to stay. If it's someone I've listened to 100 times and have seen their stuff and love it, maybe I'll stick around.
Or if it's caught your interest because you've seen it, the 7 touch points kind of thing of like, man, I keep seeing this come up, and let's see what this is about.
Maybe
that happens too. But it's a great point. You know.
And I think I was going to mention, I think the content that is adjacent to music but still builds your brand, like you were talking about some of the Minnesota stuff that I've kind of done, and like my highest viewed video was about Perkins, the restaurant. Mm-hmm. So very Midwest. Like my scope is, sometimes those things are super local, and sometimes I want to try to get a little bit wider. So Midwest, there's still a high chance that those people could come to a show or experience the music. But the content that's adjacent to the music that still builds your brand, it's actually kind of a relief, because you don't feel like you're selling yourself as much, but you still get to transition folks from completely cold, who've never seen your face, they don't have any trust in your brand yet, to, oh yeah, that's like the Perkins guy, or that's like the guy who told us how to zipper merge correctly, which I know people listening to this right now will have feelings about that initially. But it's almost a relief to not have to sell yourself on the music. And if they don't like the music, then what am I doing as an artist? And you
Right.
go through the existentialism of like, is what I'm doing, does it really matter? And it's like sometimes a quick little jab at the intersection between 394 and 94 is like enough for people to be like, oh, cool. I know, like I can feel that. And now I recognize that guy, or I know what his brand is, or,
Exactly. They can come to a conclusion without being proposed to. And that's, that dating analogy is real, because musicians will spend a lot of time down on one knee just
Sure.
asking, please
Yeah.
love this.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't have to do that all the time. Once in a while
sure.
is necessary.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For sure.
But you don't have to do that all the time.
Yeah.
You can just be your normal self and connect with people. And eventually they'll come to that conclusion on their own. I love that. What about things in your experience with your brand or with content, anything that you've stopped doing because you're like, it doesn't work. This hurts things.
Actually, kind of what you're just talking about. Like, I have sort of these like filters in my brain of like almost like nets that catch things before you post it. And a couple of those are, is it desperate or is it meta? Like thinking empathetically about cold audience consumers. They don't initially care if I get on there and I'm like, being an artist is so hard and here's why. And Spotify is the devil, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That's not my point. But if that's their first impression of you, you've kind of already lost, because your content then is geared towards people who understand why Spotify is the devil.
Yeah.
And I don't think you've won anybody over by getting on there and kind of griping about it. So that's a super specific example. And if you do that, it's okay. But I think it's good to keep in mind, like, am I getting too meta with it? Am I getting too behind the scenes? Does anyone really find it interesting? Is that a reason why they would move from cold to warm? Is that a good enough like avenue or a bridge to get them there? And so I'm always thinking about, I've like deleted stuff or taken out of my drafts because I'm like, I don't think the average person, the average Minnesotan who might listen to country music cares a lot about that and would interact with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think then once you take away those things that are desperate, they're the on the one knee asking someone to marry you things, then you get to be really proud about what you're putting out there. And I think I don't want to be known as the guy who's like out there griping about how hard it is to be a musician.
Yeah.
I just want to keep turning the wheels of like getting my message to more people. So yeah, there's kind of these filters in my head of like, is that good? Is that good? Is that good? I don't know.
I think that's really smart. I also want to throw an asterisk, a disclaimer
Yeah.
out there of that, like, there's nothing wrong with doing content
Sure.
that is warm and doing that stuff. You just have to understand the balance. And I
True.
think the biggest challenge or the biggest problem that I see a lot of times is that it's only one type of content, right? And it's oftentimes focused at people that are just other musicians. It's like the people that understand
Yeah.
your really specific situation. And while that can be fine, it's just, you have to understand that then you're not going to convert the cold audience.
Yeah.
Just, and if you
Yeah.
don't ultimately care,
Sure.
then fine,
Sure.
continue on, do anything you want. But if you are like, man, I'm struggling to build this thing and I'm not getting the response or new followers or whatever, well, consider who this content is for. It's okay to you don't have to switch and go, okay, I'll never do this again. I'm only doing cold audience stuff. You need to do whatever you want occasionally, but just mix it in. Understand that where this is going to be consumed and who's going to be interested in it. And once in a while, if you need to say, this is for the other musicians because that was something I care about and I'm passionate about, by all means, that's fine. Just understand that then the other people won't care about that.
Or I'll add to that, if you're a studio or a producer or a guitar store and your audience is musicians, then I think,
Of course,
yeah,
yeah.
maybe that's a different conversation to be like, maybe that is your strategy to get as many musicians to see your stuff, and that is you courting them from cold to warm. But if you're an artist who's trying to get their message out to as many people as you can, I think it should be primarily about the music. I actually think there's examples of people who have taken the approach, they're not doing like the Minnesota adjacent stuff. They're not doing anything adjacent besides the music. And I'll name drop them because I think what they're doing is spectacular. There's a band called Wild Horses. If you've heard of them, they're from Grand Rapids. And I'm watching us kind of grow next to each other, and then they've taken off. But all of their stuff is about the music. And I think that there's realities to even the stuff that I'm doing where it takes a lot more eyes on it in general to get those few people. But I think they have an audience now where the people that have seen them, it went very fast from cold to warm, and now they're in. And Wild Horses they hired a videographer, photographer, who's become kind of a friend of ours too. And he is amazing at what he does. And they've put their energy towards just promoting the music. And they have a very cool aesthetic, great branding. They know exactly who they are in terms of music and socials and visual aesthetic. And so it's not surprising how they've taken off from that. So I guess in me saying that, I know that my challenge even is trying to reach people adjacent to music. There's some challenges there just in the sheer numbers of it and statistics of like, if you reach 1 million people, it's a lot harder for me to get someone to a show than it would be if you're reaching them just through the music, you know? So anyway, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with, and I think you should be doing all of it.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, the episode isn't going to be like, this is the blueprint you have to follow.
Sure.
That's if that's what you're getting from this, I hope not. It's hey, if you're spinning your wheels, think about it in another way. If you're already crushing it on these things, then continue on.
Yeah.
But if something's like, man, I just can't reach, you know, this hopefully will help you kind of reframe some of those things and add. But ultimately, everybody's got their own flavor of things. And so if you've got something that's working, continue on by all means. And you should probably dabble in all of it to find out what works. Because the other part of this equation is, what are you willing to stick with? If you don't like what you're making, you will not continue on. And something is definitely better than nothing. And so, you know, you have to factor that in too. If you hate making a certain type of content, then don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just find something else.
I think that's a good way to frame all of this. And I think if you're playing the game of socials and promotion and marketing, like there are people who just only make great music and they've gotten really good at that. And I have so much respect. Almost I respect them more than myself because they're going, this is my craft. This is who I am. You can take it or leave it. And there's realities to like the amount of time that I've spent. I don't have a team. It's just me, you know, doing everything, as a lot of listeners probably are doing as well. But there's realities to the time that I've spent on the marketing side, the cold audience, thinking about the first 1.5 seconds of a Instagram trial reel. All that time, I also haven't spent on songwriting and getting better in that way. And so there's trade-offs in all this. Like if you never want to learn any of this and you just want to make great art, then like, hell yeah. Like I'm like,
yeah, of course.
And so I guess just to kind of zoom out, I guess, from some of the things, if you're trying to reframe things and get a new approach, I think this stuff is very helpful. But I feel like part of me wishes I just moved to a cabin in the woods and never thought about a trial reel in my life. And anyway, so that's all good too. But yeah,
it is absolutely. I do think all of this starts with like deciding what you want to do, what you're capable of doing.
Sure.
Clearly, if you are making something that's really, really special and it just resonates, good on you. Good on you. But remember, and this is a problem across the internet in general, that when you point to, let's say, Wild Horses, since that was the example, sure, that worked for them. It didn't work for a lot of others, and you never heard about it because it didn't work.
Yeah, good point, man.
You know, the internet is all about what's called survivor bias. You only hear the stories that worked. Nobody's showing up there going, hey, we had a band, it sounded like this, and no one cared.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
You know?
Sure.
But I can tell you there's a lot of those. There's a lot of them. Really, really talented people. No one cared. and they just didn't get heard. And that story, even if they did go make that post, nobody saw the post.
Yeah.
We only see the stories that worked ever. And so we're not really learning the full picture. We're only learning the top percentage of success stories. And so we just have to be conscious that that's what we're consuming. You know, when your favorite songwriter comes on and says, I hate when people say this or whatever, you know, and it's like, well, you also were successful.
Sure.
And you're sitting in your mansion right now. Like, maybe there's another point of view.
I think you got my gears spinning, and I'm curious to know. I heard somebody else talk about this, so it's not my original thought, but they said they used to believe the best song would win, and they don't think that anymore. And I think I'm maybe curious what you would say about, like, what is the place in the world for just strictly great music that might not ever trigger the algorithm in short form content? Because people like in my generation, I don't think we go to shows in the same way that like people who found the Replacements did, where they were going there not knowing much about the band or the show. But nowadays, you have to know a lot about a show before you go there. For me and my younger audience, like, what's the parking? What's the tickets? Is there food? Is there drink? Is it safe? Is it a good neighborhood? And if there's a million reasons to not do something, I think my generation just won't do it, you know? But it kind of makes me sad to think about just like the really great art that's out there that may or may not find its true identity in a short form content form.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Like, do you think the best song wins, or what's the place for like the really truly great art out there now? Or people who are listening who are like, I make really great art that I've worked forever on. Like, now what do I do with that? You know?
My answer to this, and this will probably be a little long-winded,
That's
so
all right.
I'm gonna try to be as succinct as I can be.
Sure.
But some of it just depends on how cynical I'm feeling that day. To be quite honest, you know, what I'm going through is going to affect how I answer that question, and I've answered it differently over the years.
Sure.
I think that when it comes to art, everybody would agree that it's subjective. What you think is really good is not necessarily what I think is really good, right? We agree on that. Okay? And then if you're a musician and you can look at some objective things of like talent of musicianship, whether that's playing an instrument or writing songs or whatever, then you might be able to add a little weighting towards something of like, well, that's not for me, but I see how it's very good, right? And you have a respect for something. Average person, probably less of that. And then you could add in not only musicianship and songwriting, but things like performance quality and entertainment and things like that, or branding, if you understand that, right? But again, let's go back to the cold audience, the average person who's not a musician, right? That makes up the majority of the listening public. They're not musicians. Art is still subjective for them, very subjective for them, because now they don't have a background on what makes a good guitarist. And they might have preferences of what they like about songs,
Sure.
but even that's wildly varied,
Sure.
right? Okay. So what happens, and this is my theory, is that a lot of people that aren't invested into music, you know, that it's just a casual part of their lives. It entertains them. They love certain things, but they don't care, you know. A lot of those people just look around and say, well, what are you listening to? And then they listen to it and they're like, yeah, this is nice.
Sure.
And then they get into it, you know, and that happens in school and college. And then maybe you change crowds and all of a sudden you're into a different type of music. And then somebody else that you think is kind of cool, or somebody you're dating, turns you on to something else. And now you're into this. Is it because that music was better? Probably not. It's because it's the people you were around that you wanted to be like. And then as long as you listen to it enough, you'll find things you like about it. That's the truth of it. Repetition is very strong in your favor of liking it over time. So it's tough today. I think when it comes to something that is, if you can say such a thing about music, like if you try to assign some sort of merit system, which I don't even
Sure.
know how you would,
Sure.
but let's just imagine you could. Like, man, that's just really, really good. I think there's too many other factors. That alone won't cut it. And in the instances where it does, you just got lucky. And then you turn around, and that's the people that'll turn around and say, well, it worked for me. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
You won the lottery.
Sure.
So maybe don't brag about it.
Yeah.
Like maybe be grateful about it instead. Like, I think it's a tough conversation to have, because on one hand, I think that there's truth in that, like, yeah, you have to be incredibly good, but there's also just right place, right time, and just being fortunate, right people, right connections, right, all that stuff, right? That's a part of it. And that doesn't take away from the hard work that those people put in, and the fact that they did do a really great job with that music or whatever, and they made some good decisions that put them in maybe a good place for those opportunities to happen, and all that. You don't want to take away from that. That's still true. But to say that, well, I did these things and that's why it worked, it's like, yes, and you got lucky. No one wants to say that.
If one of my favorite songwriters ever, his name is Dean Dillon. I don't know if you heard that name.
Yeah.
He wrote a lot of George Strait songs, and then he also wrote Tennessee Whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And I often wonder, or Townes Van Zandt, who died early, or fairly early, or Keith Whitley in the country world. Like, if Dean Dillon never found George Strait, there's this huge gap in country music over time. If Townes Van Zandt lived to be 20 years older, there's all this music that would have happened, Or Keith Whitley died at 33, I'm 30. It's like, that's very real. If he lived to be 60 years old, there would have been more albums and more songs. But you think about, like, could Townes Van Zandt have engaged the algorithm? Like, I think there are differences in the music scene back then, and labels, and it's a lot harder to do things on your own sometimes. But I think about those people who are just brilliant, like, just truly, in country music terms, I guess, just very brilliant songwriters. And if they didn't get lucky in that sense, or there's a story about Dean Dillon hitching a ride to Nashville from a stranger, and that's how he got discovered. Like, if that didn't happen, if he didn't get lucky in that scenario and didn't put himself in positions to get lucky, I guess is another way to frame that, I think we would have all missed out on a lot of good art, or a lot of good country
we would have
music,
missed out on that specific version of
True.
it.
Good point.
That's all. And
Yeah.
I think that's more evident today. So if you zoom back, it's fun to think about those stories and
Sure.
like, oh, it wouldn't have existed. Well, maybe that specific version of it.
Sure.
But he likely would have met somebody else,
Yeah.
and likely
Maybe
still
it
would
would
have
have been
made
better.
Maybe it would have been better. We don't know.
Probably would have been a lot better. Yeah. I think that's what you're getting. That's what we're getting.
The point is that the point that I'm trying to make is there's a ton of talented people, more than we could ever know. And just because that talented person ended up in the right place doesn't mean that they were more talented than the person that didn't. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. It's not for me to say. But I just disagree with the fact that somehow there's this perfect funnel where it's like, oh,
Sure.
the cream rises to the top. No, no, it does not. Sometimes, but I don't think we have the bandwidth to make those decisions. It's too hard. Think about if your job was to pick out, like, hey, here's the rising country folk artists. So you're familiar with it, you understand it, but you'd get 10,000 songs a day, and then you'd have to try to be, and you'd have this pressure, and you'd have to try to, like, okay, how do I even do this? And now let's say you take it really seriously and you listen to them all. Okay, how would you even rank them? How would you even begin to go about doing that? Now, even if you had a team of people, for let's take the listening hours out of it and all of that stuff, it'd be impossible because it'd be so subjective, and everybody on your team would have a slightly different opinion of how to rank these things. And then you would inevitably start to look around and go, well, are one of these artists like kind of doing really well?
Yeah.
Do they have a big art? And you would take shortcuts.
Yeah.
And you'd go, well, I guess they have, look, like this. Well, I heard from my friend that they sold out their show and they did Well, it kind of sounds like more people like this artist. That's what the world does.
Sure.
It's frustrating, but that's what the world does. We take shortcuts because it's too hard to objectively measure all of those options. We can't do it. And so we look at and go, oh, well, everybody's listening to this band, so I'll start there.
Sure, for sure.
And that's how it works.
And social media is it'll tell you the number of people who do, or
Exactly.
Spotify.
And I guarantee you that people that run radio stations and record labels and all of those, they're also doing this. They can't sit there and sift through every option. And so we use shortcuts. And the shortcuts are what's popular. Okay, so I was on another podcast and I was trying to come up with a music analogy for how broken the business side of music is in a lot of ways. Okay, so if you're in downtown Minneapolis, imagine a street that cuts all the way through downtown, and every shop is restaurants, okay? And all the food is free. And every chef that's running those places still has to make money and everything, but they're there because they love it and they specialize in something, they're really good at it. And you can go you're hungry, you can go stop in any one of them and eat for free. And you do, and you're like, wow, this is amazing sushi, and oh, this is a great burger place, and whatever. And you hop around and you enjoy it all. And those chefs still have to run a business. So some of them do catering for like a corporate gig or something, and some of them teach on YouTube, and some of them do whatever, right? Or have some higher private experience right? You can see all the analogies for
sure.
musicians, but it's a pretty bad business model. They've got to somehow, because all the food is free. From the consumer standpoint now, you might fall in love with one of these places and go, oh, this is a hidden gem. I'm going to come back and keep finding this, right? Because you just so happen to decide to walk into that place. Maybe because you caught a scent of it, or maybe because the storefront was really unique and interesting, and you're like, I'm going to check this one out. Or because you already know that you like burger joints, you don't care about sushi, you're only checking out the burger joints. So it weeded out a bunch of the other options, right? Because you have your preferences. The problem is it's not just one street in Minneapolis. It's every street in the world. And you can go to all of them forever for free. So why would you ever go back to the same one more than once? That's the problem that the music industry faces. Why do we go back? Okay, well, so then you start to think from the consumer standpoint of like, well, why do you? Because something catches your interest.
Sure.
Why is there a line outside this door? I have 1,000 other doors I can go to, but everybody's standing outside of this one. That's popularity. And everybody wants to be in the know, and they want to know why. Like, okay, well, I'm going to wait. Is it that much better than all those other chefs? Probably not. But there's a line outside that one, and I want to know why. Because we're social creatures. We want to feel like we know what's hip and cool. But nobody really does, and nobody could actually go eat at every restaurant. That's how the world works.
So then what do the chefs do? What does the restaurant do to ever break out of that? I guess is a question that I'm just kind of running through my head of like, in these examples of no one has time to sift through 10,000 songs to find the best one, they take shortcuts.
Yep.
You kind of go as an artist, you go, how do I lend myself to the shortcuts and go, how do I start charging for food so it's not free? Or how do I get people even in the line, even if the offering isn't more spectacular, but how do you sort of create a line so that people will then go, oh, there's a line, I'm going to come,
Yeah, and I think you start pulling on all the different levers that you can control. Maybe it's your storefront gets better.
Sure.
Maybe it's that scent that's rolling down the street, just like that little hype something, and it's like, there's an interest here. Being really clear about what you're going to get before you walk in. Do I have to even walk in here to find out what this is? Like, this should be kind of obvious. It's very accessible, right? That's all your brand. That's all your marketing. And then it's perception, right? Like, this place, I'm perceiving it to be more popular, or I'm perceiving it to have something hidden in there that's going to be really, because some people are going to see line. I don't want a line.
Yeah, true.
That's going to turn people off, right?
True.
There's those kind of people. Absolutely. Like, I'm looking for something that nobody knows about. That's a whole angle, right? And then you gotta just spin those things and work them to your favor, right? But I think at the end of the day, the truth is that it's also some luck, man. When you catch a break, you got to capitalize on it and you got to use it to your advantage. That doesn't take away that you had to do all that hard work and that the food still had to be great and all of that stuff. I don't want to take away from that. I really don't. But I'm fighting back against this idea that, well, because it worked for you, it's because it was better. Maybe parts of it were to some people. But there's plenty, I can guarantee there's plenty of chefs out there that had stuff you just never tasted that was amazing. And they just gave up because they couldn't keep it open.
That's a great analogy, man.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot, and it's kind of, it's kind of sad, right?
Sure.
But here's the other side of it. Let's lift it up a little bit. First of all, before all of this happened, before you had access to any street in the world with this in this analogy, you couldn't even, all those chefs never got the opportunity to set up shop. Music is so accessible to people to start making. And it's demonstrated how much talent is really out there in the world. There's so much of it. Back in the day when there was more gatekeeping, or it was just prohibitively expensive. You had to be on a major label to record in the studio and things like that. I can guarantee there's plenty of great singers and great songwriters that didn't even bother.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't try too hard or just didn't even see the path forward, where now everybody sees the path forward. And so everybody's in it.
Yeah,
There's tons of people make music now.
Yeah.
Well, that means that supply and demand is out of whack a bit, and like the good news is everybody gets a chance to make that outlet. The bad news is that we have more music than we're ever going to sample. And I don't know. I think it's a great time to be alive if you want just for like the ability to be creative. But you're going to have to accept that you may or may not ever get anybody to really listen to it. You're going to have to work really hard at it, which is why we're doing episodes like this, where it's like we spent a lot of time up until this point just talking about social media. And I know that people are like, I wish we didn't have to talk about this.
Sure.
Why can't we just talk about the music? And this is why. Yes. And we should also still talk about the craft of what makes music great. The problem is that I think that more people it's just hard to even get anybody to.
And I wonder in all of this, like my goal in taking the cold audience social media angle so seriously is because it's good for business. Where if that's not, again, your angle in it, if you're just a chef or a musician who wants to do it because you love it, I think that's, again, I probably respect that more. And there's people who have more traditional jobs who don't have to worry about doing the gigs that aren't super gratifying, but they pay bills, and it's never the ones that are, it's very rare that they're really fun, really awesome, and they pay great. It's kind of like the world that I live in is kind of one or the other. But I think all of these things are driving just to keep the ship moving a little bit. Like I want to charge more for shows. I want to have more ticket sales and higher ticket sales. And I want to have more streams so that when people in the industry see what we're up to, that there is sort of a line outside the door, And not that those are like false metrics, but I think that when you are building for the sake of, I want to do better business, that's my angle in this. So maybe there's a couple approaches where I think in the Twin Cities, there are some really great artists that may not leave the bounds of Minneapolis, St. Paul. Mm-hmm. And there's realities to sometimes there's more money in different areas, especially in country music. I think there's this like outer scene of it all where you can monetize and do well in that gigging sense as a working musician. And I think I'm maybe a rare example of like, I live in both a little bit, and like this weekend is a good example. Did like a writer's round in Minneapolis, super artistic. The room was so quiet. It was like amazing in so many ways. And then I'm playing in Shakopee, Rochester, Savage, and a White Squirrel at the St. Paul this weekend. So I think everything that I'm doing in marketing or business or even in the music, it's all to do better business. So that's my goal. And I would never project that on somebody else to be like, this is what you have to do. But I think that
Agreed.
I'm somebody who hears a person in a writer's round that just writes because they're good at it and because they love it. And I think my immediate reaction is like, gosh, if the world could hear this, like I just want more people to experience their song that they just played.
Yeah.
So I think there's a whole range of goals that you can have with doing music or a studio or producing or whatever. So yeah.
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 And I do think it's definitely worth reiterating that, like, this comes down to if that's what you want.
Yeah.
Right? You have to want to do
Sure.
this in the first place. If you don't,
Yeah.
forget about it. You know, like, enjoy it. Music is its own reward. You do not need to have anybody listen to it to be validated by it.
Sure.
You know,
Good point.
I respect you regardless. And, you know, as you said, like, the people that focus on just the music stuff of it, like, you have respect for that. Only if you know who they are. Do you respect the ones you never heard of?
Yeah. In theory, yes, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But
Yeah.
you're only pointing to an example that you heard of.
Right.
And there's plenty you never did. So how much respect can you have for something you never even knew? You know, I think we just have to be kind to each other when it comes to these things, because sure, there is that, like, pure artist side.
Yeah.
I held on to that for plenty of time. And then, you know, when you need to pay bills and you need to run a studio, it's like,
Yeah.
you got to do what you got to do. And, you know, to each their own. That's all I'm saying. Like, if that approach is working for you, fantastic. Congratulations. Keep going. If it's not, try these things we're talking about.
I feel like too, like, as a consumer of media, and I'll admit I pay attention to things and I'm very active on there. I think it's quick to rush to judgment of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're like sharing that. I think that we all have the same, people who are playing the game have the same goal to go, I want to push forward. And each person hearing this or each person posting on social media has their own idea of trying and effort and just getting started. And so I think over the years, I've actually kind of taken a less judgmental approach to be like, that's what they think is going to help, then they should. And that, like, we all have phases of music or socials that we're just trying and seeing what works, you know?
Totally.
And so I think to be kind to people and to say, I see you trying. Like, there are people I know of can think of that I'm like, is it great content? No, but you're trying. Like, you're really trying. I will always commend that over, you know, someone who is paralyzed by the fear of like not trying. Because I think I experienced that too, where it's so much easier to not put yourself out there and wait till it's perfect to ever release a song or a video. But if you're trying, I think that's like literally half the thing. So
Yeah.
it takes some shaping after that initial effort, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We've chatted for a while yet. I like threw away the script of all the other things I wanted to talk to you about because we got going. But we do have to cover some important stuff
Sure.
before it gets too late into the episode. For one is you got a big show coming up. Turf Club, November 26th. Lay it on, people.
This is Twangsgiving 3 is the official title.
Okay.
Which is a project of Cole Diamond, who is an amazing country act in town. And this is the third year they've done a show the night before Thanksgiving. I think there's technically a name for that night in different parts of the country.
Really?
I've been told. But this is Twangsgiving, so it's a little bit of a country-themed night of music. And the acts there kind of range from classic honky-tonk Cole Diamond, and it's me, Harlow, and Lone Rock Bride are the 4 bands. And we did a show with Harlow over the summer, and they're like amazing. I love their stuff. I haven't got to do a show with Lone Rock Bride yet, but it's 4 bands, one night. And Cole Diamond, it's kind of his tribute to Alan Jackson called Tropical Depression. And they are super fun if you've seen them or have not seen them yet. Let this be your crossover from cold audience to warm audience for Cole Diamond. And then we share a guitar player named Dan Lowinger, who's become a really good friend of mine too. So he'll do double duty that night. And the Turf Club, if you've never been there, is an amazing historic venue. Maybe you know more about it than I do.
Best remnant of the 40s.
Yeah. You look at some of the posters on the wall and you're like, I can tell there's like history here, and it's one of our favorite spots to play just for the room and the people that show up. So if you have no plans, or if that sounds fun to you and you do have plans, it's November 26th at the Turf Club in St. Paul. So yeah, I should probably follow my own advice here. There's a parking lot in the back,
Yep.
which is a great parking lot in terms of city parking. There's the front door just on University, and so those are some more details. If you're debating about
Drinks are strong if that's important
That's
to you.
right. Yeah.
They've got a small menu, some
They
good
do.
burgers.
Yeah. And there's the Clown Lounge. Have you been in the Clown Lounge?
Oh yeah.
It's just a bar, an extra bar in the basement of the Turf Club that is kind of a nice hangout before the show. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's a great venue.
Yeah.
Definitely check it out.
Yeah.
And you can get there on the light rail too.
True. Good point. Yep.
We're going to throw all those, the ticket information, the show information in the show notes so people can check that out, and we'll throw them in different posts and that sort of thing. But that reminds me is that you also have kind of a newish venture, which is the Country-oke, which is a really interesting concept. I want to know more about this.
This was the brainchild of that guitar player, Dan Longer. We've been playing together for a few years now, but his kind of running gig was with Cole Diamond. As a great sideman, Dan is kind of always looking for opportunities to book things himself and to grow. He's someone I want to surround myself with that is interested in just trudging along in this journey. And the idea of Country-oke is that there's a live band, usually a 5-piece band, including myself and Dan, and then you get to sing. So we have kind of a list of songs that you can choose from, but it's just like regular karaoke, and then it's themed around kind of older country songs. And we have some like newer stuff, Tyler Childers, Sturgill, to kind of engage the younger folks. But we get a wide range of really, really good singers who are friends of ours in the scene, and then really, really bad singers who are just perfect for what the night is.
Yep.
And we say no talent is required. And we've done it now, I think, 4 or 5 times. We have like a residency now at the White Squirrel Bar with it. And actually within the last couple of days, we've been doing a lot of promo on cold audience social media. And we've gotten all these inquiries in the last like 3 days, which has just been awesome. So we're kind of in the stage of figuring out what it is exactly. But it has been so much fun to do, and it is exhausting to do.
How big's the catalog?
I think right now it's like 80 songs,
Yeah, that's a lot.
which we're kind of adding every show. We have yet to rehearse, so it's kind of one of those. I think we do need to rehearse. So if you're hearing this and you're like, yeah, I can tell. But to kind of keep growing and to solidify, the White Squirrel is a nice place to kind of see what sticks and what works well. And we're trying to do more weddings and private events and stuff with it. But it's a nice place for us to experiment. And my job is kind of the head administrator. So I'm kind of dealing with like the signups and the people. What key is it in? Is it, who's starting it and different things. And then Dan's very much focused on the music. But I think together we have a cool kind of partnership going. So yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And it's a great example, I think, of a new, I mean, I'm sure things like this existed in the past, but where the new music business is going to be. Your kitchen is free. You're doing
Sure.
private events.
Sure.
It's still music related, and it will still fuel learning that many songs. I've had other guests that do the cover band thing as their sort of main gig.
Sure.
It's such a talent. When you have to play that many songs and learn that many songs, it does fuel the ability for like, you're studying all the songwriting and the song structures and what
Sure.
makes things work and why, and like the similarities between those things. It's a great gig. And, and it's an easier sell right away, right? It's a clear what's in it for me thing for the customer of like, ooh, I get to be on stage. That I'm willing to pay for, right?
This is the best example of in music, it's really hard to make the audience the hero. This is a great way where they are literally the only reason why it works. So they are the hero. I think in terms of that conversation, this is one of the only examples I can think of where that fits so perfectly. And then we're able to communicate that. That's such a win. So yeah.
The follow-up question though is, obviously, there's just the business of it, and that's great. But you both probably want to be able to also sell your own stuff to some extent.
Sure.
What steps are you taking to sort of bridge that gap?
Between Country-oke and like original stuff? Something that hasn't happened yet. I will be excited if and when it does, is I have a couple songs in the song list. And so there's some like connections on social media that I think that a big part of the success of the first couple times was TikTok and my own personal account there. And so naturally a lot of the people who showed up to the White Squirrel, which was like just a really great night, but I think a lot of those people were warm to my brand already.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a nice bridge there. I think we're actually creating intentionally a little bit of separation because I'm promoting other shows that are ticketed, and I want their overtime to be less of an association with me or Dan, because we're putting our efforts into, selling tickets and different things for things like Twangsgiving on November 26th at the Turf Club. But yeah, there's some nice bridges, some natural bridges, and I'm looking forward to the day where someone wants to sing one of my songs for Country-oke. Not saying it has to happen, but when it does, I think if and when it does, that'll be fun. So yeah.
Well, and I imagine you could easily sneak in one where it's like like an intermission.
Yeah.
Like hey, we're gonna do one of my songs, and if you like this, check it out. That's easy.
The format of our show, we kind of see it like a show, so it is kind of like an intentionally planned set, kind of where we'll start the show with a few songs and then kind of start each set break with a couple of our own songs, or Ryan, also known as Cole Diamond, will sing some Alan Jackson and different things. So
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There's some moments where you get to go, okay, you like this? This is also who we are. And everybody in the band plays a residency of some kind at the White Squirrel outside of this. So I'm always kind of wanting to prop people up in their other projects. So it's a really nice way to every show. I think we've said like, come back here because art and music exist here and other places for sure. But if you like what's happening, all 5 of us are here like all the time, And so there's kind of a natural, we want to be warm to Country-oke, but then if that's their introduction to crossover from I've never seen you before to I could come here every night of the week and listen to music, like that's ideal, to get people to come back. So, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. This has been so great.
Well, good.
Thanks so much for making time and sharing your insights on all of this. For people that want to connect, where do you want them to go?
I think most of the like handles and stuff can be found on my website, but Sticha on Instagram, Thomas Sticha on TikTok are probably I've kind of given up on Facebook. It's kind of a joke, but not really. But yeah, once you find one of them, you'll find them all, kind of thing. And then streaming is kind of everywhere that you find Thomas Sticha, or type in Thomas Sticha. So
we'll throw all those links in the show notes, of course. One thing I ask all of the guests, if there's something that you want to share, a little tip, a little secret. Sometimes it can be something that you've learned the hard way, or something you wish you would have known earlier. But is there a secret you'd like to share with people?
This is something that I've experienced recently, and it's not so much like a tip functionally, but more so advice for just growing in your art.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to an early demo of one of my songs from 2020 when I was not much of a singer, but was trying. And if you're listening to this and you're still growing and figuring out who you are, my words for you are, have grace for who you started out to be. And if you've grown in your journey as a singer or a musician, have grace for the person that you were 5 years ago, and you were in high school and were in middle school, because those people have made you like who you are now. I kind of cringed when I heard this demo that I did and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought this was like good. But there's no way that I would be at this point in my art or my business had I not tried. So have grace for yourself in your efforts, I guess is my word. So
great advice. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
And I'm currently taking that in myself. So yeah.
And that ultimately it's a good thing. If you look back and can say that, it means you're growing. You're getting
such a
better.
big, Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are the type that's very, very critical right away, there's a little bit of a built-in numbness to our own defects and defaults, which is a good thing, right? Because otherwise it might be paralyzed, not doing anything. And then eventually that wears off. And so then you can see your earlier work and be like, oh, maybe I wasn't that good.
Yeah.
But that's a blessing. It's a blessing and a curse to some extent. But if you don't have it at all, and you're the type that is just going to hate everything you do, you have to give yourself some grace. You won't make any progress. You'll never get the opportunity to be able to look back on something and say, that wasn't very good.
And even in a content form, I maybe was initially talking about music, but that's true even in like a video you post and you look back and you're like, what was I thinking? But that was your way of trying. And I think that's a cool way to look at things. So yeah. Content, music, podcasts, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, thanks again, Thomas. This has been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
For everybody that listened, thanks for tuning in. I always appreciate your time. I hope you learned something. If you liked it, please share it. Please leave a rating. All that stuff really goes a long way for us. We'll see you next time.